Hi everybody, welcome to today's webinar. My name is McKay Allen. I'm with Log My Calls. We're a call recording and scoring and call tracking solution. And we have these webinars once or twice a week where we try to bring in real experts who can give us advice and help you sell more and improve your business. And we're excited that Ann Ward with Ward Certified has agreed to join us today. So first, a couple of announcements before we give her the floor for a presentation, then we'll have some Q&A. First, the webinar is being recorded, so we'll make that recording available to you tomorrow morning, so be sure to share that. Second, if you have questions, and we hope you do, ask those questions. Just type them into the little questions bar on your GoToWebinar screen there, and I'll read those to Ann at the conclusion of the webinar so she can address those. And again, we do encourage you to ask questions. So oftentimes the best information is actually shared in the Q&A portion of the webinar rather than in the actual presentation itself. And then finally, as I said, we do have these webinars a couple times, once a week, generally, maybe sometimes twice a week. We encourage you to attend them, to tell people about them. Just go to logmycalls.com/webinar, and you can see the upcoming webinars as well as our past webinars that are recorded as well. And with that, I do want to introduce Ann. Now, Ann and Ward Certified, they've been providing consulting and training in the customer service area for well over a decade. They've worked with about 150,000 people in that time. They've worked with major hospitality brands, large companies in the financial sector and in other sectors as well. They have a host of useful offerings. So today she's going to be covering great greetings on the phone, but and she can tell you more about her business specifically, but that's just where her training begins. So we're really excited to have Ann today, and we're really excited that all you could take a little while out of your day to join us. So with that, Ann, go ahead.
All right. Thank you so much, McKay. Thanks for the introduction, and thank you, everyone, for joining us. As you heard, we're just going to take maybe 20 minutes and talk about great greetings. And already some of you are probably thinking, wow, 20 minutes on the greeting? It's that important. So I want to share with you some tips to make sure that not only your participants, your direct reports, or you have the ability to offer a great greeting once in a while, but you can do it all day long. So my first question really is to ask you to think about, would you rather deal, let me just do the slide, with this lady, looks calm, looks happy, looks easy to deal with, or would you rather deal with her, upset, frazzled, concerned? My guess is that you would choose the first person. And I wanted to start with that because sometimes we need to remind ourselves that we have such a great influence over our callers. And just with our greeting, if we do it well, we can set the right tone. We can calm that person down, reassure them that they reached the right place. We can also represent our companies well, we can represent ourselves well, and begin to build credibility. But that first minute really sets the tone. And so I want to take some time and give you some tips and techniques for you to use either for yourself or for your team so that you're offering great greetings all day long. And as McKay said, I've worked with a lot of different industries. The common thread with all of the companies that I deal with is that they appreciate the value of great service. And the other common thread is it's people, dealing with people. So whether they're in hospitality or finance or real estate, it's really a person on the phone talking to another person who needs help. And we've done this for well over a decade, and I'm going to share some great techniques with you today. What I'd like to do is break it down into a few different sections. And again, you may be saying, oh my goodness, this is just the greeting. And I will say again, yes, but it's that important. So we're going to start with how do you prepare for the call. Then you pick up, and you speak up, listen to that caller, find out what they need, and rinse and repeat. If we start with the preparing, I want you to think about what do you do or what does your team do when the phone rings? What I have found so often to be the case is that in call centers and customer service departments and even sales departments and every other department is we're asking people to multitask. So they're not just sitting at the phone answering the phone, but rather they're trying to do other tasks. And that leads to us feeling like that call is an interruption or a distraction, when really that's the point of our business in a lot of cases is to answer that call. So in some cases, when the phone rings, we have that moment where we say, I don't have time for this. I don't want to deal with this. Or if we have call display, sometimes we have that moment of, I don't want to talk to her, or it's him again. And all of that is what I like to call stinkin' thinking. So it doesn't lead to a good call if already I'm feeling like I'm being interrupted. So what I'd like us to do instead is, it's really hard to not have a negative thought, but what we can do is replace a negative thought with a more positive one. And I like to call this a mantra. So I'd like to choose what I'm thinking when the phone rings so that I can sound more effective. As you can see on the screen, my favorite is I rock. And it's important with a mantra that it's just short and that you're going to say it 3 times and then it has an I statement. So it could be, I've got this. I'm the bomb. I'm the man. I can do this. But I want you to think about how this sounds, and I'll role play it a little bit for you. The phone is ringing. I'm thinking about that last caller. I'm thinking about the work I have to do. I'm thinking about many other things, but my job right now is to be focused on this call. So what I do as the phone is ringing is I say to myself, I rock. I'm really not convinced yet. So I say it again, I rock. And then I say it a 3rd time, and I say, I rock. And then that gives me this body language and this tone and this feeling that no matter what happens in this call, I rock. I've got this. And it's going to help me start off the call sounding confident. And at the end of the day, that's what our callers want, is they want somebody who's confident and capable and friendly. But it starts with me having to choose my attitude. So I have to decide that I want to do this. So choose a great attitude, say the mantra. If you're not convinced of the mantra, I would say at least make sure that you've got a mirror by your computer or by your phone. And in all of my training, I give everybody a little mirror. It's not a huge one. I don't want you to get distracted looking at your hairdo all day, but a small one so that when the phone rings, you can look in that mirror and smile. We've heard that expression that you can hear a smile, and it's really true. So when you smile, it sends a positive message to your brain, and then that allows you to have a nice tone, and you're starting the call off well. So once you do that, you get to actually pick up the phone. So there's so many different phones out there. I've put a few on the board for you. But depending on the kind of phone you have, I'd like you to use that picking up of a phone as a way to improve your tone. So for example, if you're using a phone that's set offside on your desk, push it back a little bit so that you have to reach for it, because that act of reaching for the phone to say your greeting forces you to breathe. Breathing leads to better tone. If you have a headset, so you don't need to touch anything on your phone, I would encourage you to swivel your chair away from the computer. Swiveling it away gives me a chance to stop focusing on the last caller. It also stops me from thinking about, what do I need from this customer? Do I need their account number, their address, their name? It allows me to fully focus on what I'm about to say. So use that little swivel. Swivel to the right, swivel to the left, push the phone out of reach, but that reaching gets you to breathe, which improves your greeting. All right, we're ready to actually say something to our customers, and this section is called Speak Up. So in here, I want you to think about that first moment. So imagine you're meeting somebody in person for the first time. And in fact, if some of you have businesses where your customers come into your building or you go to their homes, I work with a lot of those clients as well, it's important to understand what our clients think of us. And we're kind of brutal as a society. We're kind of visual. We meet somebody and we form an opinion very quickly, less than a minute. And do a little bit of math for me first. Before I share these numbers with you, I'd like you to think about, what do you think the numbers look like? If I meet somebody in person, I have a perception of them. What is that perception based on? Well, it's based on body language, voice, and words. So see if you can break down those percentages. Which one do you think matters most, and by how much? The big reveal, there's the numbers. 55% of what people think about you, what your customers think about you, comes from what they see, your body language. Are you standing tall? Are you making eye contact? Are you shaking their hand or having open gestures? All of that matters. And then it's tone of voice. And the smallest piece is what you're actually saying. So let's translate that into our conversation today, because we're talking about having great greetings over the phone. So where do you think those numbers go? 86% of what people think about you during a phone call in that first minute comes from what they hear with your tone of voice. So it's not just the words. Words are important, but they're really listening to how you say those words, and they're getting an impression. And I want to help you make sure that that impression is really strong and favorable. But let's start with the words, because we do have to say something. We can't just smile. So here's some words to consider. I think of it in 3 categories, and then you can mix it up to match your company's culture. But people want to know who they got to, so you should offer your name. Now, we often think I should say my name, so if you need me again, you can call back and say, hey, Ann, we were talking about. But really, the other reason to offer name is accountability. When I say, good morning, this is Ann, I'm saying, I'm here, I'm taking ownership, I'm going to help you. And it already begins to give some confidence to that caller. I should tell you my location, and I don't mean log my calls, I mean accounting or billing or customer service or dispatch. So tell me which department I reached, again to reassure me and let me know that I got put through correctly, that I was dialed in to the correct number. And then the last part is really fun. You can choose the welcoming words that suit your business the most. So you could say something like, good morning, this is Ann in customer service, how may I help you? You could say, it's a great day at company XYZ. This is the accounting department, and I'm Ann. Or you can say, credit department, this is Ann, how may I help you? So you can mix it up, and there's really 2 schools of thought on this. You could either change it up so that it stays fresh for the person answering the phone, or you might want to be consistent so that every time a caller phones your business, they know exactly the kind of greeting to expect. Again, it's going to depend on your company culture. I used to work in a ski resort. We were always trying to impress people with how much snow we had. So we put that right in the greeting. We would say, it's dumping here at the chateau. This is Ann. How can I help you today? We were trying to drive that enthusiasm. Or if you called Zappos, you know, you get them and they say, hey, it's the home of blue suede shoes in Vegas. How can we help you today? So they bring that energy, that enthusiasm, and that humor into their greeting. So choose the words that make the most sense for you. Here's the words that I tend to like. Good morning, awesome Co. This is Ann. The reason I like to end with this is Ann is that drives my caller to say, hi Ann, this is McKay. And now I know to call him McKay. I know to use first name rather than last name. And that removes some of that doubt. Do I say Mrs. Ward or do I call her Ann? But if you offer up your name, chances are they will offer up what they would like to be called. So those are the right words. Let's think about how those words might not come across as well. Imagine you called and I said, good morning, awesome Co. This is Ann, with that tone of sounding distracted or bored. What would you do? Many people say they would hang up and try again. Or they might ask for a supervisor. They might try to escalate it already. Or they might get even more irritated. I don't want any 3 of these to happen. I want to be able to deal with that caller the first time. Let's imagine, though, that they called back. This time they get, good morning, this is Ann, how can I help you? So we think that inflection is good, and it is to a certain level. Because now I sound a little too new, a little too fresh. I don't sound capable of helping. So we want that combination of professional and willing and able to help. So the perception, if I have no monotone, if I have no inflection, is that I don't care. And imagine that you're calling, you've got a big issue, and that person answering the phone doesn't care. It sets you off. So without any inflection, we sound monotone, and their impression of us is we don't care and that we're bored. So let's think about how you might like to have your callers describe you. And in the training, I always ask people to pick a couple of words. So see if any of these work for you or your team. Competent. Sounds like a good thing. I want somebody who's competent. Happy might be the word you'd like them to use. What about fun? Do you have a fun culture, a fun environment, a fun product? Or is it more upbeat? We want to be light and friendly. We certainly want to be capable. You always want to reach somebody who knows what they're talking about. But is it more professional? I work with a lot of law firms, and the goal is always to sound very professional and crisp when they're answering the phone call. And certainly knowledgeable. If I'm making a phone call and I'm looking for that kind of service, I want somebody who knows what they're talking about. So take a moment and think about how would you like your agents, your team, or yourself to sound when they answer the phone. And I say it's usually a couple of words we write down here. It's usually confident and willing, professional and friendly. So it's a combination of I know my stuff and I want to help you with your concern. And then we figure out how we get there. So let's think about that inflection. I said if you have no inflection, you sound like you're bored, you sound like you don't care. And if there's parents in the audience or people who are aunts or uncles, then you know that if you read a child's story to a child without any inflection, they say, no, read it like it really is. So let me just read this to you, and I want you to think about inflection. I think you know this story. Let me in, little pig, or I'll huff, and I'll puff, and I'll blow your house in. So inflection is a punch and a pause. Let me in, punch, then a pause. I'll huff, punch, pause, and I'll puff, punch, and pause. And that adds energy, that adds enthusiasm. It also changes the meaning of the words I'm using. So if you were sitting somewhere where you can try this with me, I won't ask you to come off mute, but see what you would do to change the meaning of these words. Simple words, hey, you're great. But I would like you to try it with me. I'm going to sound sarcastic, then unsure, then I'm going to say it sincerely. Here's sarcastic. Hey, you're great. Now uncertain or unsure. Hey, you're great. And sincerely, hey, you're great. If you could see me, or if you did this along with me, you would have noticed that I changed my body language in order to change my inflection, which changed the perception and the meaning of the words. So what I'd like you to take away from that is with your team or with yourself, pay attention to your body language throughout the day. It matters. It changes how you sound when you're on the phone. We've got to consider volume. A lot of the times we don't have the phone quite hooked up right, or we might need to move in. So if your callers are saying, pardon me, and you find yourself repeating yourself a lot, check your volume, call somebody, have them give you some feedback, or move into the phone or turn up the headset volume. What can also help with volume is focusing on clarity. So I'm going to read this to you. Around the rugged rocks, the ragged rascals ran. And perhaps if you were saying that with me, you realized that you had to, 1, slow down, 2, enunciate, and 3, the inflection came through even though I wasn't focusing on inflection. So just being clear, just really focusing on the words that you're saying can help you sound even better on the phone. So some tips to take back for the team, you've heard it, and it's true. Smile. Smile when you're on the phone. It goes a long way. Think about your posture, whether you're seated or standing. Your posture changes your breathing, which changes how you sound when you're talking to your customers, your callers. Some other tips to keep in mind: standing up through the day, standing tall during the day, taking a deep breath. I often tell people that when the clock hits the hour on the hour, just take a full breath. Breathe in for 4, hold it for 2, and breathe out for 4. And people will say, I breathe all day long. And I would argue that most of us don't. We kind of pant. We get rushed, we get busy, we're talking, and we forget to breathe properly. So a full breath at certain points in your day could be a really terrific tip. And the last tip on the screen is something that I stole from my years of working at Walt Disney World. They call them guests. And before we would go on stage to greet our guests, so we'd be backstage, off behind the doors, there would be a mirror and a sign that would say, smile, you're going on stage. And that was just our clue that this is my job. I'm here to be a professional. It's my job to walk out and meet my guests and present myself in the best light. So if you think about being on stage, sometimes that helps us get over, I'm tired, I'm hungry, I don't want to have another call just like that last one. I'm on stage. I'm an actor. I can do this. Then we need to actually handle the call. What are they looking for? And sometimes we can answer or solve it in a moment. Sometimes we need to reflect, give them some empathy, some apology or appreciation in the moment. I'm so glad you called. I can help you with this. I understand your frustrations. Let me ask you some questions. Let's get to the bottom of this. But oftentimes what we have to do in this part is put people on hold or transfer them. So let's think about how to do that well. A couple of tips for you. If you need to put somebody on hold, please ask them, don't tell them. And what's really nice is to add a piece of choice in there. Would you like to do this or that? And also give them a reason why. If I don't tell you why I'm putting you on hold, it really feels like I'm just going for a coffee and I just want you to hang out. So instead I should say, I need a couple of minutes to review the situation. Would you like me to put you on hold or should I call you back? I'd like to connect with my supervisor or with my colleague and explore some options for you. Would you like to hold or should I call you back? And giving your customers that choice makes them feel more empowered and more engaged in the process. Now here's the fun one, because we often think that transferring is pretty easy. But the problem is sometimes we don't transfer very well and we end up looking bad in our clients' minds. So if you need to transfer, tell them where they're going and why. So I'm going to put you through to Bob. He takes care of that. Now when I put you through to Bob, what Bob should say, and the only thing Bob should say is, certainly, put them through. What I see in some companies is I call Bob and I say, Bob, I've got McKay on the line. He's got some questions. And Bob says to me, oh, man, not McKay. He talks too much. He's got too many, and we throw this customer under the bus that doesn't deserve it. So in that moment, the only thing Bob should say is, certainly, Ann, put him through. And then he should say, hello, McKay, I understand you've got a question about your billing. How may I help you? And he should use the caller's name. It's called a warm transfer, and it feels really good. And if you've ever called a company that did that well, you already will think, I'm in good hands. They like each other. They work well together. Let me just add one more piece of advice when you're transferring. Please don't say, I'm going to put you through to Bob. He's the best. I'm sure he can solve this. He works miracles. Because Bob might need to say no to the request, and I certainly don't want to set him up for that. I also don't want to overpromise his time, which would sound like, I'll put you through to Bob. Oh, I think he's at lunch. He gets back at 1. I'm sure he'll call you at 1:05. I can't promise anyone else's behavior or response time. It's just setting us up. So the last piece that I wanted to take a look at in this cycle is called rinse and repeat. And I'm going to reflect back on my time at Disney again. Because while I was working there, I was in college. I needed some extra money. And so I went to them and I said, can I work some overtime? And they said, sure, we've got some openings in custodial duties. And I said, that's fine, I'll take it. Well, they sent me back to Disney training for a couple of days before I was allowed to go into custodial duties. My area that I was responsible for cleaning was probably smaller than the office that you're sitting in. It was really a small area. But as you know, Disney's known for cleanliness and friendliness. So I understood the importance. But what they said to me in training is that I was going to be asked the same question 60 times a day. And my job was to answer it the 58th, 59th, and 60th time the same way I answered it the first time. Being friendly, being courteous, being mindful of what they really need. So I want you to think for a moment, what do you think the question was? And I think you probably got it. Where's the bathroom? So imagine, and they said to me, they're building the empathy for the customer, the guest. They would say, people are going to come to you, and they are going to be hotter than they normally are. It's 110 degrees out. They're not used to that. They're going to be traveling with their family, but they've just spent 3 days with their kids, and they may never have spent 3 full days with their kids. They're going to be with a child that needs to go to the bathroom right now. So you need to be as friendly and professional and helpful as you can. And even though it's the 60th time, I would walk them towards the door and say, certainly, the restrooms are over here to the left. They're over here to the left. Same inflection, same friendliness, same smile, same eye contact every time. Rinse and repeat. So think about your team or yourself. How many calls do you take in the day? And the way to make sure that you're doing each one well is to finish the call you're on completely. What does this person need? Did I answer their questions? Did I log any notes? And then take a moment after you're done and just say, next. And think of next as a way to sort of wipe clean the cache. What have I been storing up? What did that last customer take from me? Was it a difficult call? If it was a difficult call, I'm going to encourage you to stand up and say next, and then sit down again and answer the next call. Now you might be thinking, well, if we're all standing up in between calls, we're going to look like we're playing Pop Goes the Weasel. And that will be a great thing. because I'm not sure if you've heard, but they say that sitting is the new smoking. And so for so many of us, our job is to sit by the phone. So wouldn't it be great if we could get a little energy, a little blood flowing in our system simply by standing up between calls? So stand up, say next, say your mantra, I got this, I rock, sit back down, and take the next call. So where we've been, we've just spent 5 steps breaking down how to have a great greeting, and each one is really important. And it's important that we think about having a great call at the end of the day, in the middle of the day, and the beginning of the day. And these steps can really help you get there. So I encourage you to take this back to your team or to think about what's going to work for you. I know we're going to have questions in a moment, but I wanted to share some information with you. And one piece of that information is that while it's great if you have training for your team or you attend training, as you know, the hard part is how do you keep it alive after you've been to the training? So what I do for my clients is I send out a weekly, every Monday, all my customer service reps get just a short email from me with just one little tip, one thing to focus on. And the managers for customer service teams get coaching catch-ups. And that comes out on Wednesday, and that's one thing to focus on to help motivate and inspire and drive great performance. So if you would like either of those for free, let me know. You can either sign up on my website, go to wardcertified.com/about, and you can sign up, or you can send an email to my colleague Ryan, and he can sign you up. I just need your email address and first and last name. Or you can just go to Facebook, and I post helpful hints on that page as well. So I look forward to your questions. McKay, I'm going to turn it back to you and say, do we have any questions in the queue?
Really great stuff, Ann. Yeah, we do. Let's just start right off the bat. In terms of the industries where you think greetings are particularly challenging, are there industries that struggle with it more than others, and industries where maybe it's simpler based on the products they're selling? I mean, what do you hear as you train? What are the industries that need the most work with greetings?
Yeah, what I've found is that if you work in a very professional, I do a lot of work with law firms and finance, and so those kinds of callers are looking for getting through to the person they want to talk to very quickly. So a shorter greeting, more precise, is better. And then if it's a fun product, people want to know it's fun right out of the gate. When I'm buying shoes or travel or booking something that's exciting, water slides, whatever it is, I want to have some fun, so I want you to sound fun right at the beginning. So think about the product and have that greeting feel like it matches the product.
That makes sense.
Yeah. And if anyone has, if you have a follow-up, if anyone wants some help with their greeting crafting it, just send me an email and I'll give you some ideas on little tweaks you can make to it.
Okay, perfect. And here's another good question. This is actually a question about your business. He says, do you also work and deal with outbound callers, or do you mostly train on inbound calls?
No, I work with outbound as well, and I work with people who go into people's homes and offer service that way or come into the business, so it's both. Or it's all, I guess, yeah.
All, yes. Are the number of people that you work with outbound, do you find that is the skill set different, or are the people who are successful at inbound also successful at outbound, also successful at in-person customer service scenarios? Does it cut across, or are there certain people who have skills in certain areas?
There are definitely certain skills that are useful in all of those different situations. I would say the biggest difference is the mindset. So it's that choosing that attitude. I think it's harder to get motivated and pumped up to make those outbound calls. And so if that is the goal of your team or that's your role, then it's nice to know that coming into the job. And there's certainly techniques you can use to get excited, to get pumped up. And I used to work in sprints and had to make those outbound calls, so I know the challenges involved. But it really does come down to mindset. And then there are a few tips and techniques that you can use to change the language and change your responses and stay motivated in that kind of environment.
Interesting. Okay, it looks like we're getting a few more questions come in. Here's a good question. Do you recommend people having this sort of greeting, it's a great day to call Jim's Plumbing, or something sort of like that, or is it just better to say Jim's Plumbing, Jim speaking? I mean, what do you prefer in how the greeting is structured itself?
Yeah, I think you have to know why people are calling. So it depends. If you've got one phone line and you're going to get people that are new to the business trying to sign up, but you've also got people that are calling in to complain, and you've got people that need to schedule something, your greeting has to be more on the business-like realm. Because if I'm saying, hey, thanks for calling, awesome, so glad you're calling, and you're calling me to complain because the billing was wrong, it feels like a disconnect. So you might have your main phone line might be more business-like, and then your individuals who are in credit or customer service, they might have to adapt. They can have a bit more different. Certainly that salesperson, I want them to say, so glad you called, it's a great day to sign up. So it depends on why people are calling. And I just had this thought that I can imagine if you called the IRS, it's a great day to pay your bill. Thanks for calling the IRS. Wouldn't that change the whole conversation, because it would be so unexpected? That might be too extreme. But it really, you'd have to really think about why are people calling, and then what can I do to put them at ease or keep them excited? That's really, one of those two purposes is usually the goal.
That's great. This is a good question. This is more of a just general customer service question. This comes from Maydeen. How should one handle a disgruntled caller who is maybe using vulgar language, who's ranting, who's upset? You probably have an entire training just on how to handle difficult callers, but give us the brief version, if you can, of how do you handle somebody, no matter how well you greet them, they're just upset.
Yeah, absolutely. So the first thing that, as you can imagine, we need to offer some empathy and let them know that we're hearing them, so that we're working with them and we're collaborating. So there's two kind of issues. I'm going to go first, let's go for the most extreme. If they are using vulgar language that's not appropriate and really over the top, I have what I call the three-step rule. So the first time you use some language, I would say to you, friendly but firm, I'm here to help, please change your language. And if you continue to swear and cuss and be aggressive, I would say, I'm here to help, change your language. And if they continued down that path, I would say, I'm here to help, call back when you've changed your language. So that one you can see is pretty extreme. I would really want to make sure my supervisor and manager knew that that was the process, but I'm giving them a chance to calm down. I'm taking ownership of it by telling them what they have to do to get service from me, but I'm always starting with, I'm here to help. And I'm not being the victim. I'm not saying, don't talk to me like that. I'm saying, I want to help. Here's what you need to do, change your language. So that's a pretty extreme case. The other case of just having a disgruntled customer, so we didn't win them over with our greeting, then we really need to make sure we're offering some empathy and reassurance. So the empathy is, I understand how frustrated you are right now. I can help. And that 1-2 punch of, I get it, let me take care of you. Lets them know they're in good hands. They may need to vent some more, and there's some other strategies, but those are the two words, the two phrases that they really need to hear from you is, I get it, I'm your man, I'm going to help.
That's great. A couple more questions about greetings here. I think that maybe I think we should discuss too. We're having another question about specific industries where greetings are particularly troublesome. The only 2 cents I would throw in, because you've kind of already hit on this, Ann, is we at Log My Calls we record and then score tens and tens of thousands of phone calls every month. And what we hear is that in industries where people are trying to do tasks and then answer the phone. So like, for example, in the automotive industry, you've got people running in from the bays to answer the phone after they're putting on tires. They sound rushed, they sound stressed, and that comes through on the phone when somebody calls. And that impacts their ability to provide customer service as well. And I'm trying to think of other industries where that's the case, where people just kind of sound stressed or they sound hurried because maybe they're doing other tasks in addition to just answering calls. Can you think of any other industries where that might be the case, Ann?
Yeah, there's a lot. It really comes down to sort of the staffing and how much they separate those functions. But absolutely, even if you think about the doctor's office or you think about any receptionist who ends up with 3 people at their desk at the same time as the phone is ringing and somebody's looking for service. So we're often in that position where we have to multitask. And And I think
Yeah.
and that's why it's crazy. I'm going to go back to that. And that's why we break it down into some pieces. And if I'm changing tires and then running for the phone, my moment to prepare for that maybe is just something I say in my head. Okay, tire's gone. What does this person need and how can I help? So that changing your mind from I was working on something and you're an interruption to me to this person took the time to call. They need something. And being curious now. I wonder what they need and how I can help. And just that clicks the mind into gear going forward rather than thinking about what I was doing.
That's great. Well, and I can tell you too that the biggest problem that we hear as we score and listen to calls in certain industries is sometimes you actually can't understand. People aren't clear. They say it very quickly. Speak to that a little bit if you could, Ann, that sometimes people just kind of mumble through the name of the company, maybe their name. And I've heard this calling dentist offices, doctor's offices, law firms. We hear it all the time. People just kind of, and then you're expected to have a coherent response to that as the caller. Talk about that, just taking your time on the greeting, and then we've got a couple more questions coming in as well.
Yeah, and that's such a great example of what starts the call off in a negative fashion. And so often when I hear that, when I'm doing the monitoring, like you're saying, you hear that, and then you hear the customer service rep saying, they were just really mean to me. They were really aggressive. And when you play it back, you can say, well, the reason they were so aggressive is because they didn't think that you cared enough to slow down. And that's why I like those activities where give somebody a tongue twister and ask them to read it. And the only way you can get through a tongue twister is to slow down. And the couple other tips around that. Think about your name. My name is Ann. That's pretty easy. But there's certainly a lot more complicated names out there. And we've all had our name since we were small. So we know our name, but I always say they don't know your name, so slow down when you say it. And a tip is to write your name in the air as you say it, or at least the first 3 letters. So imagine I'm saying, good morning, Awesome Co. This is Ann, and I slow it down, and I'm doing this gesture as if I'm writing in the air. And slowing down gives me a chance to catch my breath if I was doing something, but it also focuses me on this caller. So it's thinking about, and I'm just thinking of another activity I did with a group last week. I had them really think about their greeting in 3 steps. So rather than, good morning, Awesome Co, this is Ann, it's good morning, stop. Awesome Co, stop. This is Ann, stop. And when you make it 3 distinct sentences, that helps you get the inflection, it helps with your volume, and it helps with the enunciation.
That's great. A couple of questions actually about Log My Calls and how it works to monitor and rate the call. Got a good question from John, and then another question here sort of about how it works. So I'll answer that, and then maybe you can throw in some comments if you can at the end, Ann. So the way it works is Log My Calls records both inbound and outbound calls, and there's several methods for capturing this recording and getting it into the Log My Calls system. For example, if you're in a call center environment, or maybe you have a call recording system in place right now, we can pull those calls into our system quite easily. Or if you don't, there's very simple and inexpensive ways to get it. It is a very inexpensive way to record calls comparative to other call recording solutions on the market because it just simply uses a different method to get the calls. So that's the first thing. Second thing is you can then log into Log My Calls and listen to the call recordings themselves. So you can have agents, people who are answering the phone, employees who are answering the phone actually listen to themselves on the phone. You can have team members listen to each other calls. You can have managers listen to calls. Or I should say, you can have us at Log My Calls actually create a scorecard and score the calls for the criteria that Ann trains on, perhaps. So there could be a award certified scorecard that we go in, our scores go in, make sure it's calibrated accurately, and rate the call, score the call, evaluate the call on those specific parameters. So then you actually have data to back up your sort of assumptions, to find out who's greeting well, who isn't, whether they're improving, whether they're not, where specifically they're struggling. So you can know where to have follow-up training, where to train in your meetings on a weekly basis as a company or whatever. And then the final thing I'll say about that is that it is actually, the data itself is critically important because it's one thing to listen to calls, but it becomes sort of, it runs together after a while. You listen to 5 or 6 calls, and pretty soon you forget what happened in the first call, because calls are pretty dense. There's a lot that goes on in them. But if you have actual data related to scorecards, and you have reports that you can pull and generate that show this data, comparing people to each other, how well they're doing, comparing departments to each other, how well they're doing, it's a pretty powerful way to determine very quickly who's succeeding and who needs significant work, and who may be, after a period of time, if they're not improving, who needs to find different work. So there's a lot of ways to use the data, I guess, is my point. So yeah, the recording and the scoring functionality of Log My Calls is very simple to implement, and actually, I would argue, surprisingly inexpensive. So, and any thoughts just generally on the importance of sort of monitoring or rating calls?
Yeah, no, you brought up such great points, because it's so critical. We might think that we're offering great service, but the problem was we get caught up in our own agendas, meaning we have to get the number, we have to get the account number, we have to do this, and we forget that we're really dealing with people on the other end, and we forget what we sound like. And the best way to improve, the best way to make customers happy is to have agents get some feedback. How did I sound? And it's so interesting that when they get to hear that and when they get to see it, you can usually figure out the patterns, and then you can put the training into place or just give people the pointers. A lot of times just giving them the monitoring gives them the chance to say, I didn't even know I did that. I wasn't aware that when they say, I want the government rate, my tone changes. I didn't even know I was reacting. So monitoring is the best way to improve your customer service. So I think it's a great, and yours is so easy to use and such rich data that it makes it so easy to figure out what do we have to do, how can we move forward and really help our customers and our agents.
Yeah, that's great. I agree. And again, it works for inbound or outbound calls. Good. Last question that I think we should probably end on, and is it seems like, based on the data you showed, I mean, you could really sink or swim in the first few minutes of a call. I mean, if you greet the person effectively and come off correctly with your tone, you can really make your call. Or if you come off poorly, it's pretty difficult to overcome that bad first impression. Can you just talk about that a little bit, just the difficulty of overcoming that bad initial element of the phone call?
Yeah, absolutely. Greetings are such an important part, and I think we've all had that experience of having an issue. I always think of, imagine you had an extra charge on your credit card and you decide to call your credit card company. Those first few moments, you're really hoping you get somebody that understands your issue, that is smart enough, competent enough to help you, and is willing to help you. And you're judging all of that in the first 60 seconds. As soon as they say their greeting, you're either saying, oh, thank goodness, I've got the right person, or you're saying, oh, this isn't going to go well. So it all comes down to that greeting, and it's so nice that when we can monitor those greetings and find out, because as you said, sometimes we're not even aware of what our greetings sound like because we're finishing working on a patient or changing a tire or dealing with somebody else. So the greetings are huge. I chose this topic. You can break down the call into so many other pieces, just like your monitoring. But this one has such a big impact that I really wanted to share some tips with all of you because it has such a big impact.
Awesome. And thank you very much for taking the time today to join us. We appreciate it. And everybody, thank you for attending the webinar today. You'll receive an email tomorrow morning that has the webinar recording. So we encourage you to share that with everybody. And then, of course, go to logmycalls.com. And then right in the middle of your page, you're going to see a sort of a TV that says Webinar Series. Just click on that button, and it'll take you to logmycalls.com/webinar. You can see this recording as well as future webinars and past recordings. It's all there. So, yeah, thank you so much for doing this, Ann. We appreciate it. It was great to have you. And everybody, thanks for attending today. Any final thoughts, Ann, before we take off?
No, thank you. If anyone needs help, just send me an email. I'll be glad to help craft any little pieces of your greetings. But thank you so much for setting it up, McKay, and thanks for the great work that you do with monitoring, because that's going to help us with a customer service across the world.
Awesome. Well, thank you very no, I think you're right. We appreciate it. So everybody, have a wonderful day. Have a great Wednesday afternoon, and hope to see you on a future webinar. Bye-bye.